Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Techstrong Women, where we feature amazing women doing amazing things in tech. I'm Jodi Ashley, executive producer here at Techstrong, and I'm here with my co-host, Tracy Ragan, CEO of DeployHub and member of a bunch of boards at the Linux Foundation. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to give you a quick update about what's happening here at Techstrong TV. Yes, it is almost 2023. So be sure to mark your calendar for our annual Predict Virtual event on January 12th, where industry leaders and visionaries will speculate about what the future looks like and lay out a roadmap to success for 2023. Speaker submissions are still open, so go out there and check it out and share your predictions for 2023. And remember, you can register for all of our events by going to techstrongevents.com, and be sure to tune in every day to techstrong.tv for great shows and interviews. Okay, Trace, what's on your mind today?
So, I continually look at the labor market in terms of the software development puzzle that we're in. And Nora, I'm sure you can pitch in on this one. It's hard to find developers. It's really a tough road to find software developers. So I'm becoming more and more fascinated with Microsoft's new open source project called Copilot. Copilot is basically Grammarly for coders, which means that you don't necessarily have to know all the syntax, just like in Grammarly. Thank God for Grammarly, because I do terrible at spelling and punctuation.
I'm totally with you.
It saves me every day. Copilot is basically generating snippets of code based on what it believes that you're trying to write.
Wow.
Now, why this is going to be interesting is because it's going to, if it really takes off, which I have a suspicion it will, it's going to open up more what I like to call new collar workers, a term I heard from the DevOps Institute. And I believe that we are going to see more women moving into software development as new collar workers. So Copilot is something we should start watching. And then from in my brain, I start thinking about the software supply chain. And if a tool like Copilot was out there, maybe we would have more of a central code base of open source functions. And we can start doing a better job of managing the supply chain and the security around it. So it has a lot of implications, but most in the area of bringing new people into this field. Now, that means new people are going to come in at entry-level jobs as programmers, but we still have many, many jobs at the higher levels, at the higher pay levels, like operations, like DevOps, like chaos engineering, which I hope we talk about today. So I think that we all should be watching the Copilot project. It is an open source project, and start looking at seeing how it's going to change our industry, because I believe it will have a pretty big, it'll disrupt us. It'll disrupt the entry-level positions for software development. If you spend 4 years in college, maybe you won't be spending 4 years in college to learn to code. Maybe we can get more people spending 4 years in college learning to be DevOps engineers instead. So some of these I hate to call them lower level, but some programming is the entry level position. And I believe it's going to really open the door to a lot of people.
Well, that's so cool. Thanks, Trace. Great. Well, let's get going here. I would love to introduce everyone to our guest today, Nora Jones, founder and CEO of Jeli and fellow Coloradan. Just going to say that. Nora, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us about yourself. Tell us what you're doing at Jeli.
Sure. Yeah. So Jeli is an incident analysis company, but we really cover the entire incident platform from, coordinating yourselves in an incident to learning the most you can from it afterwards, to seeing patterns across your incident in your organization that serve as a way to help you do better in your organization, from you leveraging incidents to understand your budgets better, to understand your headcount better, to understand your roadmap estimates better, to understand build versus buy better. It can be a really nice avenue to discover all of that. And I think as an industry, we've been leaving a lot of data on the table. And I think we can use incidents to pontificate a little bit less about what we should be doing next in our organizations and the industry, and we can use them to inform us more. So we're really trying to make that easy and accessible for people to learn what they can from them. And Tracy, I really liked what you were saying about Copilot earlier. And what I like about it, and this seems silly, but I actually really like the name. I think even the name itself, it's like, hey, we're not steering the plane for you and we're not doing all of this for you, but we are enabling you. And that is what I feel like the future of dev tools should be like. It bothers me seeing tools in the industry that are like, we will just replace this for you and think for you, and you don't have to think about these things. And I think that's a miss. Like ultimately humans and machines should work together and help each other. And so that's really kind of what we're trying to do at Jeli too, is like supplement the human being that's doing a lot of this, that's busy, that has a lot going on. So yeah, that's what Jeli is.
And, you point out something that I talk about often is that we are, I guess the shoemaker's children never has shoes. And when it comes to data, when I say we, I want to say we as a DevOps community from, from the entire software lifecycle, all the way from, birth to production and incident. We leave a lot of data laying on drives in places. DevOps intelligence has been ignored, and it is what can define us and how we can improve. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing that we don't do as much as we should with the data. And when I was looking at Jeli, it was like, yay, somebody's looking at data and making really good decisions on data, because that's where the machine learning will come from. And it doesn't have to be artificial intelligence. It just has to be pattern matching, understanding the problems we're running into. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about what I discovered chaos engineering last year. I may be a little late to the game, but it's not my area. And I was fascinated by it. Yeah. Please talk to us about chaos engineering, kind of how it really got started in your world and how it's impacted your decisions around Jeli.
Yeah. So just to give a quick definition, chaos engineering is the idea of purposefully injecting turbulent conditions in production with, a mitigated blast radius just to see how your system reacts. And by system here, I mean people, I mean technologies, I mean potential customers, and just being able to contain it in a small environment so that you can learn from it before you have a catastrophic incident that hits the news, impacts revenue in bad ways. So I started learning about it back in 2015. And it really wasn't a thing. I had joined a startup called Jet.com. And at that time, they had the highest Google AdWords spend in all of the world. And so we were getting a lot of traffic to our website. And yet we also didn't have SREs. We had like a DevOps team at the time, but our website was going down a lot. So much that we were having incident review meetings every morning, like as our stand-up. And so my SVP at the time, they hired me to be kind of an internal tools and productivity engineer. I was really an SRE, but we weren't really using that title at the time. And he was like, you can just kind of do whatever you want. Like, we can just try things. Like, let's just try things and see what happens. And I found Netflix was doing this thing called Chaos Monkey, where they would shut down a single node in an AWS cluster and make sure that, it didn't take down everything, and just to make sure we were resilient to a single node going down. And I just thought the practices behind some of it were interesting. We're just practicing like a very simple failure case. And so I wrote a tool while I was at Jet.com to do that. And I thought what I was doing was creating a tool, but really what I quickly realized was it was a big cultural change. And so I sent out a lot of emails before I turned on this tool, like, hey, does anyone have any concerns? Do you want to opt your service out of this? And I got like basically 0 responses. And so after a while of waiting, I eventually turned it on because I was like, okay, if it's not going to bother anyone, I'm just going to do it. And then I think I met like all of my coworkers that week because I had impacted a bunch of their services. We brought the entire QA environment down. And I was like fairly new at the company too. And so it it was a big learning experience for me, but I actually blogged about the entire experience. Like I was like, I'm thinking I'm making a tool right now, but really what we learned was how we reacted to those failures. And we were able to like meet each other. And like, I luckily didn't break production. We broke QA, which did impact releases and impacted things in a big way. But I started learning a lot more about organizational psychology and as it relates to the technical aspects of what we're going through. And I don't feel like we're trained a lot on that as software engineers, but there's a lot of room for it. And I think it's a lot of what DevOps is too. So that was sort of how I got into it. And then Netflix saw my blog, invited me to come speak at their organization about some of the cultural aspects of things. And then I ended up working there. What I learned while I was there was we had this really cool chaos tool that we had built. We had written academic white papers on it, like how we were able to successfully inject failure into production traffic without customers noticing, but in a way that we could learn from it. Like it was absolutely brilliant. And yet what surprised me when I got there was that very few people in the organization were using the platform. And I was like, well, we've built this brilliant technology, but what's the use of it if no one's using it? And so I started trying to figure out why no one was using it at the organization. And it turned out people were scared. They were naturally scared to inject failure in production. They weren't thinking about failure as much as I was in my job, right? They were owning a service. They were owning a service that customers used, and they had to get features out the door. And they didn't want to come to a UI that's asking them where they want to inject failure and how many customers they want to impact. Like it scared them. And so they'd stop at that point during the process of creating the experiment. And I found sometimes that even just sitting down with them and talking about that fear and talking about what areas of their system keep them up at night generated almost as much ROI, even more sometimes than using the platform itself. And I found that most of that was based on previous incidents. And so that's how I started studying incidents. Like I actually wanted to drive more traffic to our chaos platform. And so I was going to look for patterns and like speak a language that they knew, they had participated in incidents. And so, but I learned there was so much more data in incidents other than just trying to drive traffic to my chaos platform. Like you could see things like teams that were underwater and maybe needed to hire more. You could see things like services that were critical and the amount of knowledge silos that actually knew how they worked. You could see teams in practice versus teams in theory, because when you're in an incident, all rules kind of go out the window and everyone's just trying to stop the bleeding. And there's a lot of data to be found in that, like you were saying, Tracy. So like my journey from chaos engineering kind of evolved into what I was doing today. That was a very long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, it's a fascinating answer. And it's an area that I find that we should be looking at and even in a broader perspective. Mm-hmm. And again, I think about our situation with open source security. We should be able to have an incident response for open source, right? We should be able to sneak something in and see how well we respond.
Yeah,
because it's always the case that we are caught with our pants down. Production incidents always happen at Friday. It's at 6 o'clock.
Yeah,
right. It's always the case, or Sunday morning at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. And nobody's at their best when it's 2 a.m. on Sunday morning, or even 6 o'clock on Friday. And so we don't respond that well. And learning how to respond to incidents, regardless of what kind of incident it is I think more important than understanding the root cause analysis.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but I think understanding your incidents and analyzing them is important to like inform how you respond to them. I think a lot of folks at times spend a lot more time trying to get a handle on their current incidents without looking at a lot of the ones that they've already had. I think of that meme of like the girl and the boyfriend, and he's like holding her hand and he's like looking back at that. There's like this whole wealth of incidents and knowledge that you already have that could inform and make those things that you're saying even better, Tracy.
And that's where the data becomes important and the pattern matching.
Yeah.
Because we repeat our problems over and over and over. I've seen it so many times.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But we do that because we're not, taking the time to understand them sometimes too.
So
it's cool that somebody encouraged you. I mean, how fun is it to encourage you to create chaos? Like I've learned about that. Obviously, as part of my job, we've done some episodes on some other shows about it, and it's super interesting. And I always find the people that do it have like a certain personality. Like they're like you, and they're like, this is really fun. And yeah, I caused some grief, but hey, and I've listened to my husband, who's a CTO and who's been in security for 30 plus years, say to his team, we're gonna screw stuff up, and we're gonna learn because we fail, and that's okay. We're trying to tell certain personalities, they're like you said, the teams that didn't want to try it because they're like, uh-oh, I don't want to screw anything up. Right. You have to teach people that's actually helpful.
Yeah, and you're normalizing that part of work. Totally.
And I think there's a confidence level that comes with an individual who's willing to screw things up, to know that they can fix it.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like you can fix it, you probably aren't so willing to disrupt it.
Yeah. And a lot of that, is outside the individual too. It's like the system. Does the system allow for things to be messed up? And if, I think a lot of the time, the questions we need to ask after incidents is how did it make sense, or how was it possible for this person to do this thing? Because I think you're absolutely right there. I think of the Uber security incident that happened recently, and how a lot of the blame was kind of placed on that one person, when really, like, it could have maybe been focused on the system. Like, how was it possible that this engineer did what they did? And why did it make sense to them?
Well, we haven't done a very good job in terms of a lot of the stuff and I know the incident, the Uber problem that you're referring to, but if we look at the underlying infrastructure that we have, we are still pretty script based. Yeah. Scripted everything is scripted, and we haven't not done a good job of thinking about data and separating the data from the definition. Mm-hmm. And then being able to bring data into a central place and start understanding what we actually look like. Yeah. And I think that's what's interesting with what you're doing with Jeli. So tell us, how did you come up with the idea? Give us a little bit of insight about your journey. How did you start Jeli? But, did you just quit your job and say, I'm going to do this? How did you do it?
So the idea really started forming like when I was trying to drive more traffic to that chaos tool, and I started looking at patterns and incidents. So I analyzed like how people talk to each other in Slack during incidents. And then I analyzed the people that were brought in and when they were brought in and what team they were on and what their tenure was at the organization and if they were on call or off call and it was during their working hours. And then I aggregated all that information, and it was just a gold mine of data, but it also took me forever to do it. And I was like, wow, I wish I had a tool that could help me do these things. And so I started kind of hacking on it on the side while I was at Netflix. And then I didn't quite know if there was a market for it. And I started a community called Learning from Incidents in Software. I just wanted to talk about incidents, and I wanted to see if anyone else was doing sort of this pattern analysis thing, like based on how people talk to each other and how organizations were supporting new employees versus tenured employees. And, if we were able to get ahead of burnout, things like that before it happened, because it can ultimately support our system overall. And so I shot out a tweet, and I was like, is anyone else thinking about stuff like this? And I got about 300 DMs in a night. And so I started a little Slack community. Yeah. And it was wild. And it's existed since 2019. And we've done a lot of really cool stuff in the industry. We have people actually that are outside of the software industry sitting in it too. We have people that do safety critical things in medicine, that study incidents in aviation. And so we're kind of just bringing some of that thinking into the software industry as well. And so I was working with that community for a while, and I got offered a job at Slack, which, Slack was about to IPO. When a company has a lot of public media attention, there tends to be incidents tend to be heavier, and there tend to be more incidents because there's more pressure. And so I thought it would be kind of an interesting time to join, but I think as, you know, pretty quickly into being there, the urge to start Jeli full time, like really was pushing me. And being there and seeing the community I had started growing, was helping me be like, wow, there really is a huge need for this in the industry. And I really just wanted to go build it. And so I left Slack after about 6 months, actually. We had a few incidents, and it was a really like amazing time to work there and just see how folks work together in incidents with such a public facing company that was so widely used, such as Slack. And then started Jeli in August 2019.
So that's a story of service. I think that most people I talk to who have survived in a startup world, we tend to think about how we can be of service. Mm-hmm. You know, you described, you know, just putting a tweet out there and seeing if there's anybody else who wanted to talk about it because you wanted to talk about it. You were offering a service. Yeah. Something that you knew you were suffering with. So is there anybody else suffering with this? Am I the only one?
You got instant validation. That was quite the pile on of responses right away.
Yeah, I mean, it was, but it took a couple years for the community to build in a way. Like I've seen so many startups that were just kind of like, I need to find a problem around my solution. And I really wanted to make sure like I was actually building a solution around a problem. And I think you're absolutely right, Tracy. Like I feel like that those are the best startups, are the ones that are really trying to listen to what is ailing people in the industry. I mean, I think with SREs and DevOps folks, we frequently burn out a lot more than other places. And we frequently don't get noticed in organizations unless there is an incident. But yet we're all working all the time to keep our systems up and running and giving our customers a good experience. But yet no one quite knows what we're doing, like when there isn't an incident. And so like one of the things I really wanted to focus on with Jeli was to help these folks tell their stories a little bit more, and because they're carrying all this knowledge, but yet we're so kind of bogged down sometimes that we're not always the best storytellers. And so it's meant to give a place to share that knowledge and tell those stories too through data, like you were saying.
I'm glad you mentioned the burnout. You know, mental health is important in every industry, but boy, during COVID, I knew a lot of SREs who were seriously burnt out. Oh, yeah. Like they were doing everything they could on some of these systems to keep it up and running in environments that they had never worked in before, like remote, where they didn't have access to a lot of things, even though they needed them. They couldn't go back in the office. And the burnout factor was pretty intense for a lot of people in DevOps. I personally know 3 who just got out of it completely. Yeah, like I can't do this.
Even working. Are they still in the industry?
They're in the industry, but they just got out of it. 2 of them went back to programming. One of them went into testing and said, you let somebody else chase down these problems because it's a lot. SREs tend to have a lot of responsibility or a lot of the blame and none of the responsibility. Yeah. So it's can be a really, really hard position to be in. And like I say, during COVID, I talked to so many people on LinkedIn. They just wanted to talk. They were just like, I feel like I'm going crazy right now. All I'm doing is supporting problems. Yeah. So did you gather a lot of data during that time?
Yeah. I mean, we had started Jeli in August 2019, and then we went into a global pandemic in March. And we had just kind of started cementing our product at that point in time. And so, but then, just talking to folks in the industry, talking to folks in my community, it was like some systems were getting used more than ever, and the SRE's job was more important than ever, and incidents mattered more than ever. And so it was just kind of also a renewed mission for Jeli too, just kind of going through all that and really wanting to provide that support. I mean, I spoke with some folks. I did a panel back in December 2020 with folks from 3 different organizations whose systems just like quadrupled in traffic overnight, like someone from a food delivery company. I talked with someone from Netflix, and I forget the other person I spoke to, but there were a lot of systems that like just really changed traffic overnight in a way that there's no way people could keep up with, right? You could have never predicted that situation. I think as SREs, sometimes we are expected to prepare for every situation that could possibly ever happen, but that takes like a lot of time and money. And I think there's a lot of coordination things that can be happening across the organization too. Like you brought up a good point about blame with no responsibility. And I think that is accurate. And I think it can change. And so like, we're really trying to help other parts of the organization understand what SREs and these kinds of folks do so that they can learn to work with them better. Like if marketing is having a huge launch, they should probably be coordinating with SRE like every step of the way,
That's so typical when one arm's not paying attention to what the leg is up to. And
until something bad happens. Yeah.
Well, and it seems like with the pandemic, I mean, that's what with Techstrong. I mean, all of a sudden we went from an in-person organization to an online entity that we grew our company like 3 times the size that it was during that last 2 years. And that's part of when I joined it. And it was crazy to see just all the struggles that everybody was having to deal with all the security. Like suddenly everybody was on a laptop at their house. They weren't working on networks the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
It was causing all this, and still is to some degree. They not everybody still figured out how, because they want to stay remote. A lot of companies are not bringing workers back, and systems still have to operate safely.
Yeah,
these remote environments, it's just so much just hit all at once.
Are your two organizations remote?
Yes,
we are.
Well, we do have an office in Boca Raton that about I don't know, half of our staff works at, but the rest of us are all remote around the country. So
we got rid of our office. What about Jeli?
We've been fully remote, but there were only 4 of us when the pandemic started. So my plan the whole time was to have a fully remote team, but I had also just signed a lease for an office, like an office space with one of my coworkers that happened to live nearby me, like a week before the pandemic. Luckily, I was able to get out of it. But
nice.
Yeah. And moving forward, you're planning on keeping it a remote company?
Yeah. I think we might, we happen to have 8 people that live in Portland, like so I think they get together sometimes. But we try to do little mini in-person things where we can, but I think we'll stay remote.
From an investor perspective, how does an investor perceive that? Do they still think we should have offices, or are they becoming a little more understanding of a remote culture?
I mean, I raised money before the pandemic, and I had put in my deck that we were going to be a fully remote team. I think it really depends on the person and the people that you hire, I think. And we have to be I'm sure you all know this too. We have to be very cognizant when we hire, like, is this person going to be able to support themselves and ask for help when they need it? Because one thing I noticed, and a friend of mine is an engineering manager, and he was really actually stressed when we all went into lockdown. And I was talking to him about it, and he said, it's really hard for him to train junior employees now that are like just out of college. He was like, because I can't walk by their desk anymore and be like, hey, what's happening here? Because I can like see what's on their screen. And he was like, they don't know when they're struggling. And so then, it involves different management techniques too. We're not hiring like right out of college employees right now, but that's something I consider as, we think about growing our remote work is how would we be able to support folks that are not sure when they need to ask for help, or when you can't quite walk by their desk and, kind of just strike up a chat with them.
It's a cultural shift. It really is. I've learned a lot about that working on an open source project.
Yeah.
And how to encourage mentorship across the committer community. Okay. And have a place to have those discussions where everybody feels safe
Yeah.
And because not everybody in the DevOps world, and we have a DevOps tool, we have a lot of DevOps people who want to contribute, but they're not necessarily programmers. So there's a lot of education that we have to do. And it is a shift. It's definitely a shift. We have to really rethink the human aspect of software. We just have to rethink it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're being disrupted like we do everybody else, right? We're disruptors, and now we've been disrupted in terms of how we manage our humans.
Well, you were talking about the SREs, and I've had some conversations with them, and Nora, they said a lot of what you said, which is just their mental health has really struggled for the last couple of years, and how hard it's been for them. And I think a lot of those people are, used to being in an environment where they can look over the wall or around the corner and
or like,
say, hey, are you having a problem? Instead of like slacking, can you talk to me, or can you pick up the phone or whatever?
Yeah.
That some of us can work. Like my job is, I'm great remote. I'm a cat herder, I'm running around trying to catch up with all of you. But I do see where, especially we do interns, and all of our interns are typically in person in the Boca office, so that they can interact with our CEO, and he can be engaging with them and walking down the hall. And it is hard. It's going to be interesting to see the impact that it has on college students in certain jobs being able to, where they can work, because it will be something depending on what they're doing.
Well,
so I saw one solution to that. One of my nieces, who had gotten her first job during COVID, they ended up giving her 2 monitors. One she had on a permanent Zoom connection with who would have been her cube mate.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the other was her monitor. So she literally said she sat and talked to her cube mate all day, who was kind of her mentor, because she had been there for a while. She knew the ropes. And so she would just be chatting with her all day long. And she said it was kind of like I was sitting in a cubicle.
Yeah, I could see that being helpful for like someone new to their career, for sure. We've considered things like that too. We have like water cooler Zoom sessions, and we don't even use Zoom. What's the tool? Around? Have you heard of the tool Around? Our engineers use that, and it's like an Around session where you can just go spitball with each other and you don't have to join it, but like they all like it because they get to have that camaraderie like they would be at, kind of an office.
Our bosses created the monthly Jeopardy game for the whole company. Yeah. We play Jeopardy about different things in the industry, and we all have to study them up all week for 4 weeks. And then we're in teams of 5 and we play Jeopardy, and it's hysterically funny, except we have one of our interns who graduated and is now part of the company. If you're familiar with John Willis, his son, Will wins every time. So we're pulling him out and making him the host because he's so smart that he's killing all of us. So, but it's a fun way to team build when we can't all be together, and we're all learning. So that's awesome too. But there's definitely some creative. We did a holiday party during COVID where I had food shipped to everybody's house, food and wine. They got to pick, and we all got on Zoom and had our holiday party on a Zoom call with the food that had been delivered and the wine or whiskey. People got a choice.
I love that.
And so, there's a lot of creative. I'm one of those people that I have to look at the positive stuff that comes out of things. I can't just focus on this really sucked, right? And all the devastation, but the positive things that it came out of it. And there's some of these things that are really fun that no one would have thought about doing had we not. And the world was going to go virtual to some degree, right?
Right.
A lot of companies were already designing that way. So I think it's really fun that some of these things popped up. Well, I have one more question I want to ask you before we get too far along here, because we're getting close to being done. Angel investing. Tell me about that. I see that you're doing that.
Yeah. So I've done a few angel investments. I did one with an HR tech company called Guide. They provide a recruiting tool really for the company themselves. So to help the company and the candidate know which stage they're at in the recruiting process and to provide like a lot of transparency into it. It's really cool. And then the other companies I invested in are more companies that I'm like familiar with, like testing and performance related companies and SRE related companies. Nice. And so it was more, I wanted to do it with companies I thought I could make a difference in and like understood the problem space well. And it's a lot to be a CEO of a new company. And there's, I think, there were a lot of things I ran into that I would love to be able to help other people on as well. So, it's kind of a fun opportunity to talk to other CEOs and other people trying to really make something happen as well.
That's so great. Giving back is so amazing. Some people I would just think would be so involved in starting their own company. For you to split your brain off that way and be like, but I want to help some people.
I'm very careful about it. Like there's certainly like more companies I could do it with, but I want to make sure I'm also being cognizant of my time, but it's, I feel like we really also help each other out sometimes too. I think one thing it took me probably about a year to learn into my entrepreneurial journey was to make sure I'm making CEO friends too, because it's like a very unique thing you're going through as a founder. And even though you have a really great supportive network, it's hard to find folks that understand unless they're also going through the same thing. So it's just really like we help each other a lot too.
Wow, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Tracy, do you have any other good questions?
No, I don't think so. I think this has been an amazing little journey here, going through chaos engineering and all the way through the culture of having a remote office and angel investing. And Nora, it has been fabulous meeting you. I will probably I need more CEO friends. I think that tidbit of information was meant for me. You just didn't know it.
Let's be friends. I would love to. It is super important. I've supported senior executives over the years as part of my career. And that was one of the things I found is that they found it super useful. And we don't think about that. We think, well, they're so smart and they're doing all this stuff. They're good. But yeah, you definitely, it's nice to have people in a community that you can reach out to and be like, did you run into this?
Yeah.
Other people aren't going to
like, yes, you're not bananas. Like this is the thing that happened to me this morning.
You're not bananas. Oh, we don't think you're bananas. We think you're amazing. So thank you so much for being here. And we're just really glad we got the chance to have this one-on-one, kind of one-on-one, two-on-one conversation with you. And we're really excited for what you're doing. And we're going to keep watching it and see what you come up with in the future. We're very excited.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated being here with you too.
Well, great. Thanks everybody for joining us for another episode of Techstrong Women. We'll be back next couple of weeks. So be sure and check in. Love to see you. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.